The movie begins with Superman's origins, having crash-landed on Earth following the destruction of Krypton. Meanwhile, a team of scientists are circling the sun to try and harness its power, but they are running into a bit of trouble. All of a sudden, one of the scientists transforms into a hideous monster and attacks the others, courtesy of Lex Luthor. At the same time, Lois Lane is getting an early scoop of Superman saving the day even before it happened. Jimmy Olsen comes out dressed weirdly, showing off his Superman signal watch. The newspaper is plotting Lex's demise by exposing his schemes. Meanwhile, Lex is mind-controlling a weapon while working for the government but betrays them. It turns out that he's controlling the weapon that's attacking the scientists, but Superman quickly arrives and saves the day by throwing the monster into the sun. Somehow, Superman extends his bioelectric field to protect and save the space shuttle from solar flares before taking it to safety. Later on, they conduct a series of tests on Superman. He is now stronger and able to lift 200 quintillion tons. His body is changing radically as he was overexposed to solar radiation. As a result, Superman is dying. Lex knew this would happen to him, so he orchestrated the attack. Finally, Superman decides to keep the news secret so the world does not panic. Superman quickly saves a boy and his pet before being all clumsy on his way to work. At the same time, SWAT arrests Lex, but something fishy is going on. After work, Clark is walking Lois home and is being clumsy once again, but he is actually saving an old man from falling debris. When they arrive at Lois' apartment, Superman finally drops the act and reveals himself. He takes her to his fortress of solitude, and a group of robots come in to assist them. He shows off his power by lifting a key that weighs a megaton before giving her a tour inside and showing off the memorabilia. As Lois takes a shower, he waits along, and then ventures away real quick while she gets dressed to get her flowers. They continue the tour in the armory, showing her what weapons can actually hurt him. In another room, he shows her a hologram of his future descendant Kal Kent, who is the Superman of the 84th century, and Lois comments that he looks like her dad. Superman then introduces Lois to a Sun Eater, a creature that feeds on stars, and he feeds it many suns that he's created. Lois then sneaks away to another room where she finds the robots creating a clone of hers. Superman quickly catches her and tells her that she can go anywhere in the fortress except for this room. They get to eating dinner, and Superman is wearing traditional Kryptonian formal wear. Lois is still questioning his identity as Clark, not believing that he's really him. Finally, she's upset that Superman has been lying to her for years and leaves. As she's writing her story about him, she suspects that he's hiding something. All of a sudden, she starts getting paranoid and makes her way to the armory to grab a weapon. One of the robots finds her, but she quickly shoots it down. She then shoots Superman with the kryptonite gun, but surprisingly, kryptonite no longer affects Superman. It also turns out that the room Lois went to release some chemicals that caused hallucinations and paranoia. He was actually making her a present, a suit to wear and a serum that gives her powers like his for 24 hours just so she can experience what it's like to be him. Immediately, she starts to levitate. Meanwhile, Lex is on trial, and he blames Superman for everything that he did. He's found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to be executed. Lois is now flying with Superman, and Jimmy signals for help. They go to save the city from invading reptiles, but someone named Samson is already there helping. Superman flies away to clean up his mess, while Samson and Atlas save the day. They explain that they're from another century, and they are all fighting over Lois' affection, gifting her with a necklace. Superman returns the reptiles to the core of the Earth where they came from, and their king apologizes for their behavior but explains that they did what they did in response to Samson's actions that started this. Meanwhile, Lois is alone with Samson as he's constantly trying to hit on her, and for some reason, she's enjoying the attention. Superman is jealous, but she continues anyway. Samson tells Superman that he'll be dead in the future anyway, and that it doesn't matter if he gets Lois. It then turns out that they had stolen the necklace they gave Lois, and a higher being called the Ultra Sphinx has come to collect it. He puts Lois in a catatonic state where she's on the brink of death. To save her, Superman is asked an impossible question. If he answers correctly, she lives. If not, she dies. What happens when an irresistible force meets an immovable object? Superman thinks long and hard before finally answering that they both surrender, and he's right. Lois is saved, but both troublesome heroes are still challenging Superman to win her over. Superman finally has enough of their shenanigans, so they settle it by having an arm wrestling match where Superman takes them both on at the same time. He toys with them before finally destroying them. They finally leave and their date continues, and Superman takes her to the moon and kisses her. With moments left until she loses her powers, she still doesn't believe that he's Clark. Finally, she falls asleep after a tiresome day and he tucks her in like a gentleman. The next day, Clark visits Lex in jail to write a story about him. He's being clumsy on purpose once again to save his life from an accident, and they begin the interview together. Lex carries on his day while voicing his disdain for Superman, trying to read Clark's notes, but it's all written in code. He carries on and tries to intimidate Clark, and for some reason he is overconfident even though he's in jail on a death sentence. He asks how Superman is doing, knowing he's sick and dying. They continue through the present, and all of a sudden a monster breaks free. It feeds on people's energy and causes mayhem. Then it spots Superman's limitless energy and immediately craves it. They make it to the present cafeteria and the monster follows, still looking for Superman. It obliterates security, and as a result the prisoners riot. They are met with tear gas, and seizing the moment, Clark runs in stealth to deal with the situation and save the guards. The guards are cleared, and Clark stumbles again to save Lex from a prisoner, and they stick together to try and escape. Lex wants Clark to tell his story as the monster continues to chase them, so Superman creates a mini earthquake by tapping the floor and taking out the monster. Lex then tells Clark that he's always liked him because he's the opposite of Superman. Clark is a clumsy human while Superman is a powerful god. He shows Clark a tunnel dug up under his cell and explains that he could escape anytime, but he's satisfied knowing that he killed Superman using the same solar rays that gave him his powers. Lex says that he's only telling Clark as a gift before handing him over to his niece to take him back. Clark finally tells him that he never cared about humanity, and that if he did, he and Superman could have been friends. Later on, Superman is back with Lois, claiming that he'll try to restore his planet city on a planet far away from Earth. As he is weakened, he might not come back from this trip, explaining his condition to Lois. She refuses to accept it, and says that he'll find a way like he always does to overcome his problems, and that she'll be waiting for him to return, right before he flies off. After a while, Superman comes crashing down into Earth. He apologizes to the civilians and says that he's a little under the weather from his trip. Surprisingly, he finds that Metropolis is looking completely different as it turns out that he's been gone for 2 months. At work, he makes up an excuse as Clark for his disappearance, and he's informed of what happened. Jor-El and Lilo, lost Kryptonian astronauts in space, have found their way to Earth. Superman is naive to think that they are good people, but they have quickly taken over everything, right before they beat him up to the moon and back, leaving the moon broken. Sometime later, Clark has been hiding at work and is bullied by a coworker. Eventually, the Kryptonians find him and he goes away to return as Superman. Suddenly, Lilo passes out and crashes, but Superman catches her. Jor-El does the same as it turns out that their bodies have been laced with kryptonite. Lilo eventually goes blind, but Superman still helps them even after what they've done. To save them, Superman sends them to the Phantom Zone. Thinking about forgiveness, he decides to visit Lex and admits to him that he's dying. He pleads with Lex to help humanity after he's done if that was his true intention, but Lex spits in his face.
I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.
He visits his father's grave and is met by his mom. He gives her a long hug one last time before flying away. As Lex is on his execution chair, he is finally electrocuted, but it doesn't work. It turns out that Lex had taken the Superman serum, giving him powers, and then he breaks loose. Meanwhile, Superman is tending to his fortress one last time. He records one final journal entry. Having settled his affairs, he has one more job to do. Lex goes to his niece and gets to business building his weapons. They brought a red sun to weaken Superman, as it turns out that Lex has a secret ally. Superman's robots join him in the fight, and they face Solaris, a living, poisonous computer that poisons healthy stars and consumes them. Superman still has his powers despite the red sun because of his suit. The robots shield Superman until he gets close enough to Solaris to attack it. One of his robots admits that he stole the serum for Lex, and they all sacrifice themselves for Superman. Suddenly, the Sun Eater comes from out of nowhere and proceeds to eat Solaris, but it dies instead. Witnessing this, Superman is enraged and destroys Solaris. Meanwhile, Lex's army is causing mayhem on the streets as Solaris crashes into Earth before Superman puts it out for good. Clark hurries to the station to submit his last story that Superman is dead. Lex is still abusing his power, and Lois tries to talk some sense into him, and he only starts to listen when they tell him that Solaris double-crossed him and poisoned the sun. He gets angry when Lois calls him stupid, and attacking her wakes up Superman, who uses the gravity gun to take out Lex. They both have a huge fight, and Superman reveals that he's been onto his scheme ever since he tampered with his robot back at the fortress. Lex has accepted his fate but wants Superman to die first, and they end up fighting underground, crashing through a train until Lex beats him to the streets. He declares himself president, but Lex begins to see things differently as Superman did. The powers made him start to hate life and have sympathy. Superman wakes up and Lex's powers run out. Superman destroys the last of the serum and leaves him to be arrested. As he is now breaking up from the inside, only he can save the sun. He bids Lois farewell and hands her his cape before flying off into the sun to save the world one last time. He flies through space and crashes into the sun, turning it yellow again. Later on, it is a normal day. Lois still believes that Superman isn't dead and is waiting for him. Lex is away and present and decides to confess his sins and atone for them. He hands a scientist a map of Superman's genetic code, claiming that he's able to replicate it. He can now give Lois Superman's children, as his legacy will live on. This was one of the most unique Superman stories and the least talked about. The All-Star Superman is a strange story about being overpowered and growing lonely, and it is kind of sad to witness Superman's strange death. It is one of the very few times, if not the only time, that we saw Superman die and not come back. He's gone for good, and we don't know how to feel about that one. Well, this brings us to the end of today's video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel to get more videos like this one. Your support helps us grow. And tell me what you think about this film. What did you think of Superman dying? Do you think they made him more human that way and it was a better depiction? Or do you think Superman should always be invincible? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of them. And if you're watching till now, thank you. I'll see you in another video soon.